and oh, okay, we just started the recording here. So welcome everyone to our Board of Governors prep sessions. We'll first start off with our introductory slides right here. So you can go to the next one, Jaime. Here's our team. You can see us here, most of us here on camera. So here we are. Rich is here, Mary, Grace, Jaime, and Lauren. Next slide. And our Mary is our San Diego chapter representative. So it's great to have the joint sessions for the Board of Governors prep. Next slide. Okay, you can begin your journey by going online. I think once you get online, everything is very self-explanatory. We have the link here for you guys. I myself, when I started my application process, even called the customer service line, and they were very, very helpful in walking me through things that may have not resonated with me when I was completing my application. So you guys can definitely utilize that link and walk through that process. We're also happy to help if you have any questions. Here are the eligibility requirements. 1 year as the ACHE member, a master's degree, a minimum of 5 years in a management role, and then volunteer activity are those top 5 requirements. So you can go to the next slide that gives the decision metrics. We'll give you a copy of these slides so you could take a little bit more time to kind of, review them and see where you are. And again, if you have any questions, we're happy to help. Eligibility requirements for continuing education. You need a minimum of 12 in-person education hours, 12 virtual interactive, and up to 12 qualifying education hours. When you go and complete your application, you'll see where you are. I think online, it provides to you that ongoing information about where you are in your process for your CEU requirements. Your other eligibility requirements, the volunteer activities, and you can see 2 community or civic and 2 healthcare related activities. Again, if you have any questions about that, that was an area of opportunity for me. You can ask us. The application process, you can read through and see what those requirements are. We'll give you these slides, but the fee is $225 to take the test initially. Here's the domains, 10 core domains, and we'll go over knowledge areas, and we'll go over all of these knowledge areas throughout these sessions. Next slide. And then the exam outline. So 230, only 200 are scored, and measure competence, not book learning. So it's competency-based type of exam, not recall. And we'll go through all of those requirements as we go through these sessions. You'll get the helpful resource links. Also for the helpful resources, we through our committee have books that we can share with you guys if you're ready to take your exam and you want some of these helpful books that we have outlined. Reach out to us, and we can share these materials with you as well. So what to expect, the examination preparation will kind of go through that here throughout our sessions, allow 3 to 6 months to develop your skills and study, right? Coming to these sessions for the next several Saturdays. Again, the books. We have a set we could share with you should you need it. So here you go. Then when you're ready to take the exam, you'll go to the person's center and schedule it. And once you meet all the requirements. So we can go to the next slide. Again, this is materials that you can click the links and resources. Again, I want to reiterate, we have a copy of some of these resources if you're ready to take your exam and you want a copy. And we have these testimonials that you can read. We'll definitely share these slides with you about how these prep sessions really helped other candidates successfully pass their exam. All righty. All right. I think we're going to now hand over the next portion of this session to Richard, who will take us through the first prep courses.
You're on mute, Richard. Richard, you're still on mute.
All right, let's try that again. Thank you. Um, Hi, I'm Rick Narrett. I'm professor of health administration at California State University, Chico, and I've been a member of this committee for seems like forever. Um, I want to spend some time on a topic that probably is going to sound like, why are they talking about this? All of you have taken tons of multiple choice tests over your life, right? And I want to share with you a technique that I think will improve your chances of passing by getting more of the questions right, fewer of them wrong, when you're not really 100% sure of what you're doing. So this is an approach. It may work for you, may not, but I'm going to give you 5 tricks to think about as you take the test and hopefully to practice as we go through this. So trick number one is time management. There's a tendency when you start the test to panic a little bit and think it's going to take you forever, and you start rushing. And rushing means that you're likely to make mistakes. It also means you're not really taking the time to figure out how to answer that question. So you have 230 questions, as you heard. 200 of them count, and 30 are test questions for future tests. You don't know which the 30 are, so you got to take all 230 as if they're going to count. But you also have up to 6 hours to take the test, which is an incredibly long time. And I don't know, of all the people we've talked to over the years of doing this, I don't know of anyone who's gone over like 3 or 4 hours at the most. I think mine was like 2 hours. And I kept thinking, did I do something wrong? Let me triple check these. But there's an amazing amount of time. Just if you want to do long division, you've got 93.91 seconds per question. So basically, you've got a minute and a half per question. And that means that there really is no good reason for you to to be rushing. Do you have the time management slide? Is that showing someone?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
it's
It is okay. I'm not sure what's showing, what isn't on my screen. Okay, so um, just to give you a contrast, minute and a half per question. If you take the multi-state bar examination, which I had to one time, you get 200 questions in 6 hours. That's 1.8 minutes per question. If you're going for the U.S. medical licensing, you got 280 questions, but you have 7 hours. So that one's also like ours, a minute and a half per question. So you got slightly less time than future lawyers, the same as future physicians. Bottom line is you got a lot of time. There's no reason to rush. And you have to take a deep breath. You have to convince yourself, slow down and really take the time to figure out the right answer. You can analyze it, you can play around with it, you can actually uh, check it and go back and look at it later. Really, really, really slow down. And I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. So trick number two is, how do you analyze the question? And you get a question, a multiple choice. It's got 2 parts. It's got what we call the call of the question, and then it's got 4 options. And one of those 4 is supposed to be the right answer. Well, sometimes the call of the question can be kind of long, right? It can have a lot of words there that really are distractors. So the first thing you want to do is say, which part of this call of the question can I just ignore? Which part is just fluff that doesn't add anything? And which parts are really the important part? So when you look at this one, it's talking about all areas of health facilities and talking about safety, convenience, and regulatory requirements, state life code, life safety codes, JCO, OSHA, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of words there. What are they really asking? Well, when I went through this, I said, okay, it's looking for regulatory requirements, and it wants to know what part of the facility has the highest standards. The rest of that doesn't matter. There's nothing about safety convenience. There's nothing about JACO. There's nothing about the state fire marshal. what area of the facility. And by taking the time to look at the call of the question and eliminate them, then you can then focus on it. You can actually even, if you want to, make it more specific, right? And this is the second part. Rewrite it in your mind. What are they really looking for before you've looked at the options? What do I really have to find an answer to? And out of all the words up here on the top part, it really comes down to what area of the facility must meet the highest regulatory standards. So does this take time? Yes, it's going to take you a few seconds. It's not going to take you a long time. Did I mention you should slow down? Yeah, slow down and use the time to figure out what is the question really asking. You also need to, as you look at the call to question, identify negatives. Negatives, not all, except things like that, they they slip in there. And if you look at the question really quickly, then you're possibly going to miss that. And it means that you're sitting there trying to figure out the best answer. And really, you're looking for the worst answers. So you start getting confused because three of them seem good. Well, no. When you look at the not, then you see that you have a different answer. So which of the following is not an advantage of corporate compliance? If you missed that as you read it over quickly, you'd say, which is an advantage? And that is going to not help you answer the answer correctly. One trick that people have pointed out for this is read the question backwards. Organization, healthcare, for program compliance. If you do that, again, not going to take a lot of time, but you do have the time, then you're going to find those negatives, and that's going to help you answer the question correctly. You want to look for other keywords that are telling you what they're looking for. So, example, most, least, best. These are questions that you might show up. Which of the following is the least serious? Which best describes what's the most important? And as you're looking for negatives, you should also notice these. And as you do that, that is going to help you find which of the options is going to be the best one. Right. So again, reading it backwards, taking the time will help you find those words. And if you practice it, you'll find out that it really does not take as much time as you might think it will, but it will improve your score. Finally, once you've done that, take a second, think, okay, which area of this do I need to think about? What do I need to know to answer this? And as you're aware, there are 10 areas within the BOG exam. And by taking a second thinking, okay, what do I need to know? Then you focus yourself, right? There are questions you're not really sure, is this finance or is it ethics? Because those can overlap. Well, ethics overlaps with everything. But it helps you focus your mind into the right answer by saying, once I've identified which part of the question I need, maybe rewrote it in my mind, once I found the negatives, the key questions, now what do I need to know to answer this question? And that focuses you before you start looking at uh, at the options that you have, the four options. Now, this may be the most useful of the tricks that I'm going to give you today. And you're going to practice this hopefully, and then you're going to say, why didn't they teach me this in sixth grade when I started taking multiple choice? I don't know the answer, but I think they should have. And you'll find that this trick really will help you with any multiple choice that you're going to take, whether it's the DMV or whether it's the state bar exam. Whatever it is, slow down, look carefully at each of them. And then instead of saying, what is the best option of my four choices here, instead pretend that you have four separate true false questions, right? So you go through and you look at the first one and you read the whole call to question with that answer and say, is that true or is it false? When you've done this, ideally, three of them are false. And that means that the remaining one has to be the correct one. So you're going to apply the Sherlock Holmes law. When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to say, I'm going to eliminate 3 because they're false. Even if I don't know that this other one is true, it has to be because it's the only one there, right? So you're trying to eliminate the questions, eliminate the options rather. As I mentioned, some may ask for most or best, some other similar thing. And that means that you might end up with 2 or even more that are correct answers. You're going to have more truths than you want. But if you can eliminate 2 of the 4, then even if you're guessing between the last 2, you've improved your odds. 50-50 beats 1 out of 4 any day. And even if you're guessing, it's going to help improve your score. And bad news is sometimes you just plain don't know the answer. You look at it and say, where did this come from? I don't remember hearing this. Well, if you can identify 1 or 2 that are false, then you will do better with your guessing, which is what you're going to do for the others. All right, let me try an example here and show you how this works. So this is a real question that you might run into or something along these lines. And which of the following third-party reimbursement provides the highest financial incentive? Because it's charge, cost, capitation, and per diem. And if you love finance as much as most people and you love econ as much as most people, you'll look at this and say, I don't want to do this, right? You're going to answer it. Okay, so let's start with the call to question. Here's how it was presented to us. And we're starting saying here, do I need all these words? And which are the important words? What is it that it's really asking for here? So think about that for a second and say, what here are they really looking for? And what I think they're really looking for is financial incentives that reduce cost, right? So the rest of it is not as important as looking for the financial incentive. And I want to make sure I'm looking for an incentive that is going to reduce my cost. Okay, so now I know what I'm looking for. Now I can focus, right? And I can even rewrite it in my mind. I think what this question really asks is, which reimbursement method promotes reducing cost? A lot simpler, right? So I've gotten rid of extra words. I've focused in on what the question really wanted. I'm looking again to see, are there key words there? Well, there isn't a negative. Cost reduced to provider the for incentive. I don't see a negative, but I do see the word largest there. And that means that's telling me that more than one answer might be correct. It might be true, but I'm going to have to determine which one provides the strongest incentive, right? So now I know that going in that I may get 2 truths. And finally, I say, what do I need to know to do this? Well, I need to know about reimbursement. I need to know incentives. So I am trying to focus myself within the finance area of what I've studied for the test. Right? So I've identified the key points. I've looked for the key words, the negatives, and then I've focused myself into finance. Now, finally, I'm ready to look at the choices. So I've reinterpreted the question here, right? I wrote it to which reimbursement method promotes reducing cost, and those are my 4 choices here. And I'm about to give you the first of what we call a brain walk. That is, I'm going to assume I was answering this question in a test setting, and I'm going to talk through what is going through my brain as I attempt to answer this question. People have told me that walking through my brain can be a very scary place, but bear with me. All right. So I'm going to treat these as if they're 4 separate true false questions. And the first one is, which reimbursement method produced reducing costs? Charge based. Okay. So here's my brain walk. What do I know about charge base? I know it pays providers what they charge. So if they charge more within reason, then they're going to receive more. And that means the actual incentive is to increase charges, not to reduce costs, right? So that's what I know about charge-based payment. And therefore, yep, that one is false. My second one, walking through my brain for cost-based. Right? What does cost-based do? It pays providers based on their cost. If their costs increase, they get paid more. Look at Medicare in the 1970s. The actual incentive here is not to decrease cost, it's to increase cost. That means this one also false. Okay, capitation. What do I know about capitation? Well, I know it determines the payment before the service is provided. It's prospective payment. It's not linked to the costs or to the volume of care. And the provider actually makes more money by reducing costs because their revenue is locked into a certain rate. Right. Well, what does that do? That means that they will make more money by reducing costs. Does that sound true? It sounds true to me. I think it is true. So I've got false, false, true. And I could be tempted now just to write down C and move on to the next question. But again, I'm not going to rush because this one said least, or excuse me, the question that is asking for which, helps promote one. Maybe there's two. Maybe there's more than one. Maybe there's something does better. So I'm going to walk through the fourth one too. Fourth one's per diem. So what do I know about per diem? It's also a form of prospective payment, just like capitation is, but per diem means you're getting a set payment for the number of days of inpatient care. Medicaid tried this back in the 80s. It means there's an incentive to eliminate the costs during that stay, but there's not an incentive to eliminate unnecessary bed days. Actually, if you can add on another day, you get more money, okay? Which is why no one does this anymore. So yes, this does kind of sort of give an incentive, but it doesn't really give the total incentive. So is this true? Is this false? Well, it's a maybe. So where am I? I said charge base was false. I said cost base is false. Perspective is true. Or excuse me, there should be capitation is true. And per diem, maybe, but capitation's a larger incentive, and therefore the answer has to be C. Right? So what I've done is I've gone through and instead of looking for the best answer, I've tried to eliminate the wrong answers. Does this take time? Yes, it takes a little bit of time. Do you have plenty of time? Yes, you do. You are not rushed. You have the time to do this, particularly for areas that you're not as comfortable in. By eliminating the false answers, you're improving your chance of finding the true one. Okay. Trick number 4 here is dealing with lists. And I hate the questions that give you a list and ask, what is the correct order? I just find them really, really confusing. And they drive me crazy when I do them because I can't remember what's what. They all start looking alike and keeping them separate in my mind of which one I liked and which I didn't. It's confusing. So examples here, what are the steps in procuring an IT system? They're going to list out a bunch of steps and you have to figure out which ones work. What is the correct order of stages for change? What is the correct order of Maslow? All of those require that I look at a list within each of the options and I try to put them in the right order, find the one that is in the right order. Well, the trick here is to add one more step, right? One more step before you start looking at the true false and say, which of these choices, which of the words they're giving me in my list has to be the first one or has to be the last one in whatever sequence. Right? So again, let me give an example here. This is a type of question you might get. Which of these is the continuum of care? Right? And I look at that, I just want to say, I don't really want this bad enough to answer this question, but I have to. So I've got long-term, I got post-acute, I got primary, I got intensive, I got hospice, I've got eternal care, that's the cemetery. Um, which of these has to be the first on the list? Well, you're probably yelling at me saying, obviously, it's primary care. Primary care is the beginning of the continuum among all these choices. And interestingly, primary care shows up in each of my choices, but only in choice C there is it the one that's first. So that means I can most likely eliminate those, right? Because I know now those are going to be false. I can double check it. Long care before acute, post acute, no. Acute care before primary, no. Hospice before cemetery, yes. But hospice before primary care, no. So I've limited those. Those are false. I'm going to double check this one. Primary comes before tertiary, which comes before post-acute, which comes before hospice. Good. I got them in the right order. And once again, C is going to be my right answer here. Finally, the last of my tricks is dealing with low-hanging fruit. Like any test, some of the questions on this are going to be harder than others. It may be just because they're hard questions. It may be because you really didn't pay any attention to finance or to econ or something else fun. For me, it's HR and governance. Those are the two that I just never pay attention to in life. And therefore, if I'm faced with a question, I don't like those. So some are going to be harder than others. Well, the nice thing with this thing is that you are able to first improve your chances by doing the technique we've done, right? Particularly the true false, right? But you can also take advantage of the test center, allowing you to put a check mark next to a question and coming back to it. So you never want to leave a question unanswered because you need to get all the points you can. But if you're not sure, that is, you put in a tentative answer, but you're not really sure, if you've gotten it down to a flipping a coin, if you just want to spend more time on it, just check it off and then come back. You're probably going to want to go through and do a double check anyway, but you can look at it and say, I've got the easy ones out of the way. Now I can concentrate on the hard stuff. Okay. Now, these techniques take a little bit of practice. And when we get into things and we ask you later on in the program to put in what your answer is to a question, most of you are going to do it really fast. I don't want you to do it fast. I want you to do it slow. I want you to analyze the question. I want you to really figure out what it's asking. And then I want you to do the true false. And I want you to keep reminding yourself that you have plenty of time. So using these techniques, practicing them as you do sample questions will mean that when you get into the actual test, it's going to work better for you. And that is my recommendation on how to answer questions. And I will turn it back to our team. So do you want us to take over with the healthcare areas? Is that our
So,
okay? All right. Well, let me start with introducing Lauren. And Lauren is a graduate of my program. She was one of my students and is now one of my colleagues. She teaches for us, but she got her master's in healthcare policy from American University, and her real life, she's a government affairs associate with California chapter of the Emergency Physician Group, and therefore she reads legislation all day and can tell you what it really means. But she also lectures in our health administration program at Chico. Among other things, she teaches our class on the healthcare system and our class on our capstone class, and is my co-coach on our statewide winning College Bowl team. So she has a 3-month-old that's not here today, so we don't get to see him. Um, so the way we're going to do this is I'm going to read the question to you, and then Lauren is going to do her brain walk. Okay. On the ACHE website, you've got the areas for each of the domains, the 10 areas, and spend some time on these. Ask yourself, where am I knowledgeable? Where am I not knowledgeable? Hopefully, anyone taking this test knows the types of healthcare providers, but think about trends. Think about the continuum of care, and that will hopefully help you organize your prep to the areas that you need. Next slide. Next slide. Next again. Okay, so here's our first one. And again, I'm going to read the question, and Lauren is going to give us her brain walk. So the question is, improving profit for a provider service network that contracts with employers on a capitated basis, but pays providers on a fee-for-service basis, possible by Lauren. Go for it.
Okay. This is one of those questions where there's a lot of words, and I don't know how much all of them matter. So it sounds like, looking at this question, what it's really asking me is, from a provider perspective, like a provider group, they are being paid by employers on a capitated basis. So the revenue they're making is capped per person they're serving, but they're paying their individual providers on a fee-for-service basis, which is what it says on the box. So I want to find out how to maximize profit there. All right, so question A would be increase the number of inpatient procedures. And right away, my brain says that's false. Increasing the number of inpatient procedures means I'm paying out a lot on fee for service, but because I'm only getting paid capitated, I'm not going to make more money. So scratching out A right away. Reducing per member per month rates to employers. That also seems false. Reducing the rate would reduce how much money I'm bringing in. That's going to decrease my profit. Increasing payment rates to network hospitals. Also, no. Increasing how much we're paying is also going to cut into our profits. So without even looking at D, I feel pretty confident that D is the right answer. And D is reducing utilization. I assume this should be utilization of services. So yeah, reducing utilization would be more profitable for me because I'm getting paid whether or not my network is using services, but I'm only paying out when services are being used. So the answer should be D.
And it is.
Woo! First one right.
Okay, number 2, this has fewer words for you. So
Okay.
which of the following is true about a capitated managed care organization arrangement?
Okay. So this is basically asking me what I know about MCOs. So question A, or answer A, the provider shifts financial risk to the MCO. No. I don't think so, because MCOs were created to reduce financial risk. So I don't think that's right. B, the provider can bill separately for each service. It says capitated right in the question, so no. C, the provider must wait to bill the MCO until services have been provided to a patient. Again, that runs directly contrary to a capitated arrangement. D, the provider is paid a set fee. That feels more true to what I know about capitation in terms of payment and MCOs. So I'm going to say D.
And you're on a winning streak here, 2 out of 2.
You know, the fact that there were 2 D's in a row makes me a little nervous, but it just goes to show you, you gotta see the process through, and not let the little superstitions get to you.
Particularly given that the computer randomizes the order of the potential answers. So yeah, don't worry if there's a whole bunch of 1 in a row. It's not you, it's the computer. Okay, which of the following is not one of the reasons that HMOs and PPOs have lost traction in cost containment in recent years?
Ah, this is a negative question. There's a not. So I am going to look at this. What I'm looking for is, what are the reasons that HMOs and PPOs have lost traction in cost containment? And then I'll know when I find the one that isn't true for that I probably have my correct answer. So answer A, new technology and pharmaceutical products have affected the amount and types of services being demanded. That is a real thing. So that's probably not my answer. B, increased payments as a result of physician and hospitals' ability to consolidate and mobilize negotiation leverage. Also true. I keep tabs on trends in healthcare. I know that large physician groups and hospital systems are growing in popularity. So B, probably not my answer. C, consumer and provider dissatisfaction forcing government intervention in managed care. I work in policy. I can tell you that the government loves intervening with managed care. So probably not C. D, the Affordable Care Act banned PPOs and HMOs. That would be hilarious if true, but it's not true. And this computer is trying to mess with me because I think for the 3rd time, the answer is D.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, this is a general one. How is ambulatory care delivered?
Okay, so not a lot of words to parse out here. If I were actually taking this exam, this would probably be one of my softball questions. Not reading the answers, but just looking at them. I feel like C and D are probably going to be the 2 it comes down to, if only because it looks like they're written very similarly. And I feel like a lot of times, when there's questions where there's 2 answers that look very similar, one of them is typically your false flag, and one of them is the right answer. So answer A, medical staff membership. That doesn't even make sense as a possible answer. B is patient preferences, which again also does not make logical sense as a potential answer to the delivery of ambulatory care. So we're down to what I expected, C and D. In community-based settings, ranging from home to physician offices, to clinic-based settings, or in outpatient or emergency departments of hospitals. So that feels correct to me. but I'm going to look at answer D just to make sure there's not something that they're trying to trip me up on. D, in community-based settings, ranging from home to acute care facilities to clinic-based settings, or in inpatient or emergency departments of hospitals. So if you're just skimming, if you're not slowing down, this is one of those questions that can really mess you up because there's only one subtle difference between answer C and answer D, but that difference makes answer D incorrect. If I was just skimming and only looking at the beginning and the end, D could seem like the right answer. But because it includes inpatient, that can't be ambulatory care. Inpatient is an overnight stay. It is definitively not ambulatory, which means the correct answer is C.
And it is. Lauren, looking at this as a list, and as I said, I hate lists. So when I looked at C and D, I said, ugh. Instead of looking for the one that has to be at the beginning, you looked at it the other way, which worked, of saying which one cannot be an answer to the question. So how is ambulatory care delivered? No, it cannot be delivered inpatient. And that was easily eliminated D. So again, when you're looking at lists, look for specifics that will allow you to answer it, such as which has to come first, which has to come last. But in this case, which one cannot come at all.
Yeah, and some of that too, I think, is dependent on just what your knowledge base is of which part of the list you want to make sure that you know.
Okay, the cost of graduate medical education are of concern to government policymakers because
Oh, GME. I feel like this is an area that not a ton of health administrators work with on a day-to-day basis. My knowledge of GME is limited to government policymakers because that's the field that I work in. So let's see what we can parse out here. All right. Answer A, the number of residencies and residents are not centrally controlled. Okay, that sounds like something that would be of concern because sorry, that's my dog. I know that the government gives money to GME programs. They help fund GME. So not controlling the number of residents and residencies means that the amount they have to pay out is outside of their control. So A could be correct. B, the number of medical school graduates exceeds the number of residency positions. I'm not super well versed on the number of medical school graduates and residency positions, but I don't see how that would connect to the government's GME cost, because if the medical school graduates aren't going into residency, the government's not paying for them. So I don't think it's B. Managed care organizations are relatively uninvolved in the payment of GME. Whether or not that's true, I don't see how that affects government policymakers. And D, many residency positions are filled by foreign medical graduates. Again, whether or not that's true, it doesn't really connect to cost, because whether it's filled by a native citizen or a foreign medical graduate, the government still has to pay the same. So I'm going to say A.
And fortunately, it wasn't D. Lauren, when I read that, one of the things that I kind of skipped over as I scanned, I was looking at, okay, GME is concerned too, and cost really is the key there. If you didn't focus on the cost, then most of your explanations wouldn't make as much sense. So it's important, again, to read the call to question carefully and look for that key word. And here, a key word is the cost of this, not
And
the patient
that's
itself.
how they get you with the distractors is, there are a lot of parts of this answer that could be correct and might actually be true, but they're not true to what they're asking me at this moment.
Right, because the number of med school graduates exceeding the residency is a concern for physician supply, but it's not a cost issue.
Yeah.
Let's go to 6. Which of the following is a unit of measure commonly used to determine physicians' clinical productivity?
I'll brainwalk this one, but I feel like this is another one where you kind of either know it or you don't. Although if you know the other acronyms, then you can figure out which one is the right one. So A is RVU, which I know to be relative value unit, which I believe is the measure of physicians' clinical productivity, but let's keep going just in case. CMS is Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, although I might have the M's backwards. That's a government body, not a unit of productivity. IPA is either an independent physician association or an India Pale Ale, depending on how close to Friday we are. And CPU is a computer power unit, so how fast your computer can function. Again, not a measure of clinical productivity. So I'm going to say A, and if it's correct, I will have a celebratory C. Just kidding, it's way too early for a beer.
So this is a good example, though, of how even if you don't know the answer, you're able to eliminate choices, and that improves your chance. So a lot of us don't know how RVU works, but we should know what CMS is. We should all know that. We should know about independent practice associations, if not beer. CPU, we should recognize as part of our computer. The fact that CPU doesn't even show up in healthcare probably helps you eliminate it. So even if you don't know what our views are, you can improve your chances of getting there by eliminating one or two of the others. What population demographic factor is currently having the greatest impact on healthcare organizations?
Okay. Demographic factor. Okay, ethnic composition is answer A. I know that ethnicity can have some impact on health conditions, and there's some associations there, but I don't think that is necessarily the strongest correlation, because greatest, I feel like, is the key word in this question. I'm not just looking for a right answer, I'm looking for the rightest answer. So I'll put A on hold, but that seems not as strong to me. I don't know that insurance coverage is necessarily, I wouldn't consider it a demographic factor off the top of my head. So that doesn't seem entirely right. Geographic distribution does matter. I know there are geographic healthcare shortages. I'd say that's probably a bigger impact than ethnic composition. So if we're ranking them, I'd say C more likely than A. And then age cohort, I feel like is a fairly strong demographic impact. I know I learned a lot about, the baby boomers aging and needing more healthcare when I was getting my degrees. So I do feel like that's stronger than geographic distribution or ethnic composition. So I'm going to say D.
And it is correct. Two ways to think about this one. One is, as Lauren did, of is this a population demographic factor at all? Right? That helps you eliminate some. But then the other, she said greatest is there, but it's currently. So what factor is currently having it? And that's a thing that we might say, is there a change going on? Well, there's not really a big change going on in geographic or ethnic composition. Uh, we'll find out next week if there's a big change on insurance coverage, but we know that aging is a factor that is currently going on and has been going on, and we've been tracking it for generations. So the word currently helps me on this one as well. Public reporting of outcomes information has become a high priority for healthcare payers because.
All right. A, measurements of performance have now become well established, standardized, and accepted by all parties. That is not true. Work in policy, and I'm always arguing with people about the right way to measure things. So to me, A is immediately no. B, purchasers are pressuring for disclosure of meaningful performance information for use by buyers and consumers. Maybe come back to that one. C, consumers in healthcare are now, oh, I can't even finish with this one without laughing. Consumers in healthcare are now well organized, and managed care organizations feel a need to satisfy them. Most consumers of healthcare that I know are not, in fact, well organized, and they wouldn't understand what information that they would want for outcomes, let alone demand it from their MCOs. So, not C. Physicians are increasingly encouraging patients to evaluate insurance plans based on publicly reported data. My physicians have never encouraged me to do anything insurance related other than get them paid. So I don't think it's D, which makes me believe that the answer is B because it is the only one that didn't feel resoundingly false.
So you added a criterion, which is that if you can't make it through reading it without laughing, it's probably wrong. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a fair criterion to add.
We'll keep that one in mind. Okay. Health savings accounts were established through which law?
Laws. Okay. Answer A is the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. There are so many things that could be in a Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. Technically, there have been several COBRAs that have impacted healthcare, and this one doesn't have a year, which makes me nervous, but I can't rule it out necessarily. The Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act. Okay. I mean, it's not, HSAs aren't explicitly prescription drugs, so I don't feel super strongly that that could be it. HIPAA, which I know to be, and most of you will know to be the information privacy protections for healthcare. And then the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I feel like I don't know the answer to this one off the top of my head. I feel like the Americans with Disabilities Act predates HSAs. So I feel like it's probably not the ADA. oh, this one's going to kill me. I'm going to feel so embarrassed if I don't know it. I don't feel like it's B or C. I don't feel like it's C. I don't feel like it's C because I feel like I know the details of C fairly well. So I feel like it's got to be A or B. Okay. So how do I decide between A or B?
Flip a coin.
I mean, I got a 50-50 shot. I've taken it down from 25% to 50%. So that's progress. If this were the actual exam, I would probably skip this question and come back to it because it's one where I don't know it. But something about the fact that there's not a year on that Cobra irks the policy person in me. So I'm going to say B. I got a 50-50 shot.
And the coin came up heads. Um, this is a great example of, all right, we don't know everything. None of us do. And particularly when it starts listing out laws, and when we get to laws, we'll talk about ways to organize your knowledge of that. But if you don't know it, you don't know it. But there are two that just really look wrong, HIPAA and ADA. So that at least improves our odds. Where I looked at B, I was seeing Medicare prescription drug is one thing, but and Modernization Act. So was this Medicare modernization? Could HSAs be considered modernizing Medicare? I don't know. Not really sure, but at least it made it feasible that it might be. And when I'm doing that 50-50, I'm just looking for anything that leans me to one or the other.
Yeah, and for my brain, the other thing that leaned me towards B over A is when I hear Cobra, I think of the insurance option after you lose your insurance, like when you leave a job. And then I think EMTALA, which I believe was also in Cobra legislation. And
Yeah.
those are the two things that stand out to me. So I felt like it probably wasn't a Cobra.
And you were correct. But, good example, we don't know everything, and sometimes you have to guess. You do not have to get a perfect score on this test, anything close to it, to pass. They won't release the pass cutoff, so we're not really sure, but I've heard rumors it's around 2/3 of the people passing. Okay, so it should be 2/3 of the questions correct to pass it. So yeah, don't get upset if you don't know everything, because you don't, and none of us do. Right. The demand for nursing care is a function of two elements.
Okay. Well, this question is tricky because I'm from California. And in California, we have nursing minimums, but not every state does. So I need to wipe that from my mind because this is based on federal rules. So, option A, the number of patients and the physicians on staff. Number of patients feels like it is a core component of the demand for nursing care. So that seems right. Physicians on staff, I mean, I think you can make an argument for it, but it's not directly connected. B, the number of patients and how sick they are. That seems very correct to me. Because again, I'm a California native, and I know that that's how mandatory minimums are determined, is the number of patients and the acuity of the unit. C, the number of physicians on staff and their specialties. The fact that that doesn't include patients at all makes me say no. And D, the number of PHO and HMO contracts. Again, no patients, not the right answer for this. So I'm going to say B, number of patients and how sick they are.
And you are correct. This is One that you can also use the list approach, right? And you look over, you've got a bunch of different things here, number of patients, physicians on staff, how sick, specialties, contracts. Which of those do you have to have for demand? Well, you have to have the number of patients, right? That's a given. If all the ones on that list, all the options, that's the only one that really makes sense that you have to have it. So eliminate C and D. And then of A and B, number of patients and physicians on staff, or number of patients and how sick. Yeah, the number of physicians on staff is certainly less important in nursing staffing than or nursing care than the sickness, the acuity of the patients. So you take it backwards again and eliminate the ones that don't make sense, but the list approach allows you to say which has to be here. Before we go on to number 11, Lauren brought up a really important point about the test, which it is a national test. So whatever state you're in, you have to remind yourself that you are different than the other states or the other countries. And if you're thinking of an answer and it's really specific to your own state law, think about whether it applies nationally. Approach this from a more general viewpoint, a more national viewpoint. Next. Didn't we do this one before? We
It's
did.
it's a little different, but yeah, it's a very similar question.
All right. So what is the order?
Well, I am going to use the same list technique that you used in your walkthrough. I know that the healthcare continuum is going to start with primary care, and there is only one answer here that starts with primary care. So,
But before we get the answer here, wait a minute. I want to say, how do we know that we're starting with the beginning of primary versus starting with the end? I mean, the list can go in both order, or the order can go in both directions.
Rick, why do we think the same way? I was about to mention that one of them ends with primary. So I want to look at the one that starts and the one that ends with primary and determine which order makes the most sense. So A ends with long term, which is near the more extreme side of the continuum, or starts with long term and ends with primary, but it goes primary to palliative care, and that is a jump. So I'm going to say A is not correct. The order is not there. The correct components are all there, but they're not ordered the way I want them. B
So
doesn't have
sorry, go ahead.
primary, so B is out. D doesn't have primary, so it's out. It also has surgical as an option, which is a specialty, not a place on the continuum. So I'm going to double check C, and my gut feels right. Primary care, acute care, long-term care, palliative care. That seems accurate. I would say C is correct.
And it is. Hopefully, they will not put a correct answer that goes the opposite direction. So if A had been long-term palliative acute primary, that would definitely be a problem because in theory you'd have two correct answers and that would be bad test writing. So I think they will not do that, but you do have to look, if they're asking for an order, look in both directions. Let me point out also that, if you go back for a second, that when you're looking at trying to organize your knowledge of healthcare organizations, which you'll do as you prepare for the test, organizing it along the continuum of care is probably a good way to do it, to think, okay, who's involved in primary care, who's involved in inpatient care, who's involved in post-acute care, things like that. Think of the continuum and then organize your knowledge of the health system that way. Next question. Your board of trustees has voted to terminate the privileges of a physician. Which of the following organizations must you inform? I
Okay.
should have emphasized must, but that is a keyword.
That must is a keyword there. This is a good time for me to mention that one of my blind spots as a health administrator is I haven't worked in a clinical setting. I've primarily worked policy. So this is not something I've ever had to deal with in practice. So this would be one of my weaker areas. So answer A, American Medical Association. Okay, well, I work at an association. I know that they're private institutions, despite their many ties with government. So I don't think I don't think you have to inform the AMA because they're not governmental in any sense, and not every physician is a member. A local medical society is typically a branch of the AMA or their state medical association. So I don't think that's the right answer for the same reason. National Practitioner Data Bank sounds right. So maybe C. And then D, the Joint Commission. When I think Joint Commission, I think of like hospital quality. I think of things like deemed status. I don't necessarily think physician regulation. They might have physician measuring components, but I don't think that they're looking at an individual physician level. So I'm going to say C.
And you continue with your streak here. Just like AMA and your local medical society, Joint Commission is not only not government, but it's at least in theory optional, right? Because it does give you the deemed status. Medicare deems you have met their requirements if you're accredited, but there are several other accrediting bodies besides Joint Commission. So it wouldn't be, if you're accredited by one of the others, reporting to Joint Commission would make no sense. So you can eliminate the three of them that way. And even if you're not 100% sure what National Practitioner Database is, or data bank, it's the only one left. And it is, by the way, one where you're required to report it to them and to check them for who has lost their privileges elsewhere. This also shows that the 10 areas are not absolutely clean breaks, clean differences, because this one overlaps as to the last one with laws
And governance.
and governance and others. So you'll see that some of these areas will have overlaps and you're not 100% sure which one you would classify it in when you're thinking of what do I need to know. But it doesn't matter because on the test, they're not labeled by the topic area and they're all mixed together. Which Medicare plan allows the enrollees to participate in private health plans?
There are so many jokes I want to make here, but I won't. So I teach the parts of Medicare. I know that when we're talking about private health plans, we're talking about Medicare Advantage, which is Part C. Part A is, let's see if I can do this right. Part A is hospitals. Part B is physicians. Part C is Advantage. And Part D is drugs. So I'm going to say Part C, which is answer B, because they like to mess with you. You might be tempted to say, oh, the answer is C because it's Part C, but they're not in alphabetical order. The correct answer is B.
Yeah, and again, remember that the computer is randomizing the order of the options. So this very clearly could happen. You might get them in the right order, but you might not. And you do have to read the question, not easily fall into that trick. Lauren, how many of your students at graduation could answer that question?
I want to say 100%.
Yeah,
I hope 100%.
I want to.
I don't. Maybe when they're walking the stage next year, we should make them answer it before they get their diploma.
We'll try that. And do you know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? Another common mistake with undergrads. Let's break for a second and ask, does anyone have any questions either regarding these questions themselves or about test taking technique or about the test generally? Any other questions that you have? And either raise your hand, you can ask it verbally or type it into the chat.
Somebody asked earlier about if it's an electronic test or if it's filling in bubbles. My understanding is that most of the sites offer it electronically. I know that they offer it at Congress, and I'm not sure if it's in paper format there, but it's primarily an electronic exam.
Which is good because that way you get to have the thing like check, you get to check the boxes or recheck the questions at the end. Someone else asked about the practice book or the books that we have. Do you have ebooks or just hard copies? And the answer is we just have hard copies. Meaning we have to physically mail them to you and you have to physically mail them back. Other questions? Well, if not, let's try a few other questions here. And why don't you chime in also and give your answers before Lauren gives hers? So let's do a few minutes of that. So get the first one up here.
Oh, somebody did ask, where is the study guide? You can find the information in the slides that will be sent out to you. And then I believe there is somebody already answered in the chat. There's a 60-day cooling off period between failing the exam and when you can take it again.
Okay, so a management approach. This, by the way, doesn't look like healthcare. It looks more like business, but let's try it. A management approach that relies heavily on performance measure, identification of best practices, and formal process specification.
Okay.
And feel free to chime in and give us your answer as well after you've thought it through thoroughly.
Meanwhile, I'm going to think it through thoroughly, but out loud. So, management approach stands out as a part of the question. So, answer A, evidence-based management. I don't entirely know what that is or means, but it does sound like a management approach. And given that we're looking for something that relies on performance measurement, that it would be evidence. So A is a maybe. Interdisciplinary plan of care doesn't even sound like a management approach. So I'm going to say probably not B. C, service excellence. Again, not entirely sure that's a management approach. D, point of service approach. When I think point of service, I think of like where you're checking people out. It doesn't necessarily say anything to me about performance measurement. So my gut, based on this brain walk, is A. And the chat seems to agree.
Yeah, again, even without knowing it, you can probably eliminate. So what are we looking at? We're looking at measurement, best practices, and formal processes. And that to me makes evidence, just the word evidence jump out at me more than the others.
Yeah, and that's
Even
kind
if
of
I didn't know it.
It's kind of where I ended up too.
Yeah. Okay, medical, this is going to be a tough one, Lauren.
Ah.
Medical care provided on an outpatient basis is called.
Well, they do try to get you a little bit here. So just glancing at the answers, I'm pretty sure I can say it's not D, Medicare. A, urgent care. Well, I mean, technically, yeah, urgent care is outpatient care, but is that the most right answer? And then same with emergency care. Emergency care can also be outpatient care, but is that the most correct answer? B, ambulatory care covers care provided in the urgent care provided in the emergency department, and care provided in all other outpatient settings. So I would say the correct answer is B.
And it is, let's go back on that one for a second. Urgent care is outpatient, emergency care is outpatient, but outpatient is not urgent and it's not always emergent.
Yeah.
So looking at it both directions kind of helps.
Yeah, it's a all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares situation.
Oh God, now you're getting into math.
It's geometry.
Oh yeah. Let's look at the next one. And by
Okay.
the way, before we do this, I want to point out just a little discussion going on in the discussion board of someone who did not successfully take it and has given some good advice of what she might do differently. So I would encourage you to take a look at what you just wrote because I think it's really good. Okay. A physician who manages broad categories of hospitalized patients is a or an.
Okay. A general practice physician. Okay, well, general practice, I mean, it seems broad. I don't feel like I hear general practice used a ton in healthcare. So that one I don't love. B, hospitalist. Well, we're talking about hospitalized patients. So B seems really right. We're going to keep trucking. C, internal medicine physicians. So this feels like another one like the previous question where I feel like an internal medicine physician could be a hospitalist, but not all hospitalists are internal medicine physicians. And D, cardiologist. Well, cardiologists can be outpatient and they can also, they don't manage broad categories. They only really manage one type of patients. So I'm going to say B, hospitalist.
Yeah, I mean both GP and hospitalists would be considered generalists, although, like I said, GPs are not usually found anywhere anymore. Um, uh, more the family medicine. But if you look at the question that says broad categories of hospitalized patients, it's more likely to be a hospitalist than a primary care generalist. Good. Next one. Okay. What links financial incentives to the quality of care provided?
All right. This is not, quality of care is not my strong suit. Stan would be so mad at me. Okay. A, HEDIS. Sounds like a thing I should know, but I don't off the top of my head. I feel like that's some type of survey. B, patient satisfaction score. I feel like that's a part of measuring quality of care, but it's not the financial incentives. C, value-based purchasing. That sounds right. I feel like A and B are a part of C. And then D, population health. It's not D. So I'm going to say C.
And you would be correct. Patient satisfaction scores are certainly looked at more than they used to be, depending on how competitive your market is on that. But it's not a direct link to the financial incentives, right? So your value-based purchasing means that your value-based purchasing arrangements means that you must meet specific things. You have an incentive to improve in those areas that are supposed to be tied to quality of care. And if you're like Lauren and you weren't sure what HEDA stood for, I wasn't either. I looked it up. Healthcare Effectiveness Data and Information Set. I think we have time for a couple more here. A continuum of maintenance, custodial, and healthcare services provided to the chronically ill, disabled, and mentally handicapped. So you've got two separate lists in there to play with.
Yeah. I feel like I can ignore to some degree the first part of the first list, the maintenance, custodial, and healthcare services. I know I'm looking for a continuum. And provided to the chronically ill, disabled, or mentally handicapped. Well, a continuum of care provided to the disabled, chronically ill, or mentally handicapped is long-term care. That's the definition of long-term care. And I can see that long-term care is here on my list. The other options, acute care, that's not typically custodial. Ambulatory care, also not custodial. Subacute care, no. So I feel confident that C is correct.
I did my rewrite slightly different. I eliminated maintenance, custodial, and health, but I kept services. So continuum of services provided to this group. I think we actually probably were thinking along the same lines. I just left a word differently. Oh, a true false one for you. A
Ooh,
patient's self-determination or the right to make decisions regarding his or her own healthcare is called patient autonomy.
throw in a law and ethics question at me. That is true. That is the definition. Self-determination is the definition of autonomy. So
It is. It is true. That should be carved out, not carved out, but carve out is a managed care. Well, we got the D moved to the wrong place. Carve out is a managed care technique in which the insured obtains permission from a managed care organization before entering the hospital for non-emergency care. True or false?
that feels false to me. That seems backwards. Carve out feels like something they wouldn't cover, not something that they would.
Yeah, I mean that's what's really describing is prior approval.
Yeah, it's describing prior authorization.
Yeah, I mean, a carve out is where they subcontract part of your care, such as mental health or pharmacy, to another organization.
Yeah. So false.
Everyone else thinks it's false too. It is, yeah, hospital pre-authorization.
Woo! I know words.
All right. A program to identify and correct improper payments from Medicare to providers with the aim of preventing future improper payments by Medicare. A common improper patient is for surgical services provided in the wrong setting, inpatient instead of outpatient, internal Medicare audit. Boy, is that a weird question.
That is,
Break it down. What is it really asking?
I mean, I think it's giving me a definition and it's asking me, is that the definition of an internal Medicare audit?
Okay, so rewrite it to an internal Medicare audit is
A program to identify and correct improper payments from Medicare to providers with the aim of preventing future improper payments by Medicare.
I would stop a period there and then say an example is
Yes.
it's all running together, but it's worth taking a minute to organize it to see what it's really asking.
The fact that it says internal makes me feel like that's incorrect. Internal implies something happening within Medicare. But the definition it's giving me is describing something that's happening between Medicare and another group. So I'm going to say, knowing absolutely nothing about billing and fraud evaluation, I'm going to say false.
Yeah, and someone else pointed out it's the Medicare recovery audit, and that's what the answer is.
Woo.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, let's just do one more. The health outcome of a defined group of individuals, population health. Again, another definition, it looks like.
Okay. This one is I want to, there's not a lot to parse out here. It either is or it isn't correct. Um, a defined group of individuals I know is a population, and outcomes, health outcomes are part of health. So yeah, sure, true. Why not?
Hey, so before we finish up, we got 3 minutes left, and I want to ask Lauren, and I want to ask the rest of the team here, is for you to prepare for this section, this domain within the test. What is a good approach that you would take to organizing this? This one probably has more information than any of the other areas, more different areas, less specific. What might you do? I talked about organizing along the continuum of care, but what else might you do? Lauren's saying take her class.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't, you should. It's a fun time. The other thing that I would do is kind of do a gap analysis on what you think you already know, and don't waste time studying the areas that you're already an expert in. Like when you get these study guides, there is absolutely no reason for you to treat them like a book for leisure reading. You shouldn't be reading the entire thing cover to cover. What you should be doing is finding the areas that you know you're weak in and focusing on those. Because the areas that you're strong in, you might not know, like you saw with the, law question where I didn't know the exact answer, but the knowledge I had of the other answers that were incorrect led me to the right answer. So don't focus on trying to be an expert in everything. Don't study the things that you already know. Find the areas you're weakest in and focus on those instead.
Mary, Grace, anyone else have advice on this area? I'll throw in another technique, and you'll see this one later on when we get to law and ethics, I think, or the law section rather. I love matrices. I put absolutely everything in the world into a matrix because it's the way my head works for organizing. So what you might do is say, okay, I'm going to list out the continuum of care first. Then I'm going to say what organizations are involved in this part of the continuum. What patients is it aimed at? What other healthcare providers are involved? How do we get paid within this area? And then just fill in the blanks. And that's a good way to do gap analysis. Maybe in looking at long-term care, you know about skilled nursing, but did you remember to put in assisted living? Did you think about uh, not just elderly patients, but disabled patients? It helps you to organize it. And even if you're not doing it through reading, you can just sit down and say, what do I know? So find a way to organize your thoughts that work for you. All right. Well, we have come to 11:30. Um, we will next week. I forget. Anyone know what our topics are next week?
Human resources, information technology, and information management.
All right. So who's got our closing words? Anyone?
Um, I I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning for our first session. You will get the recording. In addition to the slides, our program chair, Kevin, will be sending that out before probably by midweek, by Wednesday, if not sooner. So thanks everyone for joining.
And we'll see you next week.